Hi everyone and welcome to a new video on the CBI channel. In this tutorial series we're creating a Django and React dashboard app in which users can see database data visualized in various types of charts. This is not the first video in this series, in fact we've already done 7 before, in which we've covered the basic setup of Django and React. We've enabled page navigation and created a responsive navigation menu. We built our database models and I showed you how we can get the data to the backend, to the front end. And we already experimented with several charts such as the pie chart and the donut chart. In this video we're going to continue and we're going to be focusing on creating a stacked bar chart inside of our application. And that bar chart is going to show the quantity across the different product lines split on the branch where things have been sold. And in the end it's going to look something like this. Now to create this we're going to be following 6 steps. We're going to start by going to the Material UI documentation and adding a bar chart to our current project. Then we're going to slightly change that so that we know exactly the data structure and the end result that we want to achieve. Once that is complete, we're going to create an API inside of our Django backend so that we have the database data available for the chart. And then we're going to fetch that database data from our backend so we have it in our frontend. Then we will try to pass the data to our chart and we're going to be adding some data labels so that we can see the correct values. So let's get started with the first step, which is adding a bar chart from Material UI to our project. Now, if we go to the documentation of React charts, we can go to the left-hand menu and then go to bars and click on the bars overview. And over there, we will find a number of examples that we can pick for our project. Now, you can already see that there are some examples for the stacked bar charts, which display how you can stack different bars on top of each other. But to clearly explain how these charts actually work and what the best way is to apply database data to these charts, I actually want to find an example where they do something like that. And the example where they show that is actually this one under the header of layout. And you can see that this is about rainfall inside of Seoul in this case. And if we expand the code even further, you can see that what they do in this code is they're using a certain data set and then referring to different columns to configure the bar chart. And that's exactly what I want to do because I've tried it the other way around and that is very painful. So what you see in this example is that they have a data set right here under the constant of dataset, and they use this data set to get to this result. So what we're going to be doing right now is copy over the data constant and the example from Material UI, and we're going to slightly configure it so that it becomes a stacked bar chart. So first things first, we can copy over everything in the horizontal bars.js and make sure that you are in the JavaScript section. And we do that by clicking this button of copy of the source. And then we're going to go to our project, and under the folder of charts, we can create a new file called stacked bar chart.jsx. And in there we can paste the complete code that we have seen from the documentation. Now, one of the other things we also need to do is we need to go to the weather.ts file, and we're going to copy over the constant of the data set so that we can actually use the data inside of our example as well. So in the export default function right here under the horizontal bars, we can paste in the constant of data, and that is going to just have all of the data readily available so that we can pass it into that chart. Now, one thing that I will change right here is I'm going to call this my stacked bar chart. And now we also need to make sure that we can actually view this one inside of our dashboard one page, which we've also done in our previous videos. So I'm going to go to the dashboard1.jsx file, and in there we can use the component of my chart box that we created earlier to have this one available inside of our project. And if you remember correctly, I've created a chart box which allows us to store 3 different types of charts based on some information that we can put into here. If you have not followed along so far, you can just create a page and make sure that you have the bar chart pasted on there so that you can actually see it in your frontend. So we're going to start in this page and we're going to do import of my stacked bar chart, and I've actually misspelled that. So let's rename this and do stacked bar chart. And we want to update the imports. And we can actually delete the import of dataset on the top there as well. And let's save that. And let's also make sure that this is called my stacked bar chart right here. And now we can then say that this is also an import of my stacked bar chart from my stacked bar chart. All right, so now in the chart box, we can actually render this particular visual by copying over the parameters from the previous one and now name it icon free, title free, and chart free. And those are also the props that our chart box expects, because you can see that we've listed them right here and that they're also present right here. So we have highlighted the places where they need to go. And then in here, we can define that the chart is going to be equal to my stacked bar chart. So we do my stacked bar chart right here. And in this video, we're going to be focusing on creating a stacked bar chart, which shows the quantities per product line, but also per branch. So we can name this quantities per product line and branch. And then of course, we also need an icon to go along with this, similarly to the previous videos. So we can go to the documentation, look again for the material icons. And in here, we can then say that we can do something like product. And let's take this nice category part right here. And then we can go to the top of our dashboard one page and say that the category icon needs to be used for the chart free. And let's save this. And now let's start our server and see what this example looks like. So first we need to activate our backend, and we can do that by doing cd into our backend. Then activate our virtual environment with venv/script/activate. And then we can start our server by doing python manage.py run server. And our backend is now active, and we can do a plus sign to also do it for the front end. And there we do cd into the front end folder, and then we do npm run dev. And now let's see what our app looks like. And when we now open our front end, you can see that we have this nice looking chart, similarly to what we had in the Material UI documentation. Now, what we want to do is we want to use this data inside of the concept of dataset to create a stacked bar chart that shows the months as the x-axis and then the different categories such as London, Paris, and New York as the stacked bars in the visual. Because then we can use that example to structure our database data and get it for the product line and the branches. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that we have these months on the x-axis and not on the y-axis. Now, if we scroll down, we can see that in our bar chart, it is taking a look at this data set, which is this constant right here, and it's picking different columns for the different options. So you can see that for the y-axis, it takes the data key of month, which refers to the column name of the month right here. So what we can do is simply say it's not the y-axis that needs to show the month, but actually it needs to be the x-axis. And in addition, we can then also delete this part that says that the layout is horizontal, because we want to have the default, which is vertical. And as a last step on the top, we can also delete these chart settings, because over here it already is trying to format the x-axis, and that means that all of the other changes we do further down is not going to work. So I can just delete this part right here, and then also take the width and the height of the chart setting and actually paste that inside of our bar chart instead of the chart settings, because we just want to put them in here. And to get that to work, we actually need to say that the width is an equal sign and then some squarely brackets like this. And the same goes for the height, where it needs to be an equal sign and also defined like this, without the commas. Now, of course, if we take a look at the other charts, the width and the height are a little bit different, because the width is typically 400 and the height typically 200. So in this case, I'm just going to make sure that the width is 400 and the height 300. And with those changes displayed, we can now see that the months are on the x-axis and the values on the y-axis. Now, interestingly enough, you can see that we only display the rainfall of Seoul, because that's highlighted inside of this block right here. And also when we take a look at the series, it only shows a series for the data key of Seoul. However, we also have other columns that we can display, such as London, Paris, and New York. So let's also try to include those ones in there to make sure that we can have more bars and see how we can make it a stacked bar chart. So inside of these series, I'm just going to isolate this one a little bit more. And we're going to add some other series here as well. So we can copy over the data key of CU. And if I now mention that we want to see the data from London, and then say that this is the London rainfall, and save it, you can see that we have actually two bars present right here. And same if we copy it over again, and we decide that we also want to see New York in here, we can simply specify that as a data key and then hardcode this as the New York label. And let's also add the rainfall. And then we have them next to each other as well. Now we want them to be stacked on top of each other. And we can do that quite easily by making a small change in our code. So in here, all we need to identify is another parameter and say stack. And then in here, we can define what the name of that stack should be. Now the rule for this is that all of the stacks with the same name will be summed up together. So if I give this one stack A, and then also this one stack A, and also the last one, the stack A, and I save it, they should all be topped up into one stack. And you can indeed see that now they're all on top of each other. So we actually have the idea of a stacked bar chart here already. Now what you can also do is name one to stack B. So for example, New York is going to be a stack on its own. And then you can see that the London and the Seoul rainfall are summed together, but the New York rainfall is still being stacked like this. Now I don't really like it like this because it's quite confusing, but you can try to do it like this. Now what this actually means for us is that if we get the data in this kind of structure and we make sure that the month is actually referring to a product line and the different columns have the different values of the different branches, then we can pass them in like a series like this and make sure that we have the right data. So let's go to our backend and make sure that we can arrange that. Now, if we go and take a look inside of our database, you can see if we go to the branches that we have 3 branches available, named branch A, branch B, and branch C. So we would need to create a value column for each of those branches. And then if we go to our product line, you can see that we have 6 different ones. So in the end, what I would expect for example, the health and beauty, is that we're going to make the data structured something like this, where we simply say that the constant of our data is equal to this. So our data in here would actually be structured like this, where we have our product line. And for example, that can be the health and the beauty. And then we would like to have columns for the quantity of branch A, which can be something like 100. But we'd also like to have the quantities of branch B, something like 200, and then also the quantity of branch C, and that could be something like 300. And then we can use the same way with this series right here and define exactly what columns we want to see as the different bars. So let's make sure that we have the data in our backend structured like this. Now inside of our backend, that means that we need to create a new view set, a new URL, and a new serializer. Now the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to the data folder and then to our views.py file. And then we can create a new view set, which is going to show the data for the product lines with the different quantities per branch. So I'm going to copy over this latest view set of gender data view set. And in here, we can name it something like product branch view set. Now in here we can have permission classes which are going to be the same, and also the query set is still going to be from our supermarket sales tables. And then we will have another serializer which we will create shortly to be replacing this one. Now inside of this list function we need to define in detail what data we want to get. Now the first important column that we want to get is the one from the product line. Now, when taking a look at our models.py file, you can see that we have the product line and both the quantity inside of our supermarket sales model, but we don't want to get the foreign key one, but we actually want to get the name which is highlighted in the foreign key table. Now, to get that, we can simply do something like this, where we say supermarket sales.objects.values, and then say that we're looking for product line. And then we use 2 underscores and then specify the name of the column that we want to get from the foreign key table, which in this case is the name. Now, below that, we are going to be needing three different columns because we need the quantity of branch A, the quantity of branch B, and the quantity of branch C. Now, this one that we have right now is just going to take the sum of quantity, but we need to filter that quantity to only display it for the branch A. Now, to start this, we need a few different imports because we need some help from Django.db.models. And next to our current imports, we're also going to be importing something called integer field, case, and then also when. And we're going to be using these to write a statement that is going to say when this is the case, then we're going to be doing this. So inside of our annotate function, we're going to make it a little bit bigger. So what we will do is we can say that the name of this column is going to be the quantity branch A, and that is going to be equal to a sum in which we will do some conditional statements. So I'm going to just delete quantity for now, and in here we state that case, and then we open some round brackets, and then we can do when, and then branch underscore underscore name is equal to A, and then a comma. And then we can say if that is the case, then we want to do the sum, but for the field of quantity. And then we can also say after this when statement that we do a comma, and we're going to set the default value to 0. So in the case that there is no quantity for A, is going to use a 0. And then we can also say that the output field needs to be an integer field, just to make sure that we are all aligned and that they know that it's an integer. Now what this indeed does is going to only sum up quantity if the branch underscore underscore name is equal to A, and the branch underscore underscore name refers to the models.py file, where it's going to look at the branch, but then the foreign key value of the name, and that needs to be equal to A. And inside of our database, you can then also see that in this branch table, under the name column, we indeed have a category called A. So that is how we're going to be looking for the right value. Now we need to do the same thing for the other ones. So I can copy over this annotate statement and do a slash after the first one, and then copy it over, but then for quantity branch B. And for there, it's going to be the same thing, but then we want to only do the quantity where branch name is B. And then we can paste it again and say that we're going to create a column called quantity branch C. And in there, we filter when the branch name is C. And let's now save this. Now for the rest, it is still going to pass this query set through a serializer, but the current serializer is set on the gender data serializer. So we're going to go to our serializer.py file and create a new serializer, which only has the columns in here that we want to bring to the front end. Now with this view right here, we will get a column called product line name, and then three different columns with values called quantity branch A, quantity branch B, and quantity branch C. So in the serializer.py file, I'm going to copy over this gender data serializer, and we're going to be calling it product branch data serializer. And then we can just delete all of this in here. Now the first field that we're going to be expecting is the product line underscore underscore name, and this is going to be equal to a serializers.car field, because this is just going to be text. And in here we're actually not going to be naming a source name, because I'm just going to take the complete names that we have inside of our view, because we can just pass in the column names inside of our frontend. So we don't need to reformat it here already. Now the other ones that we're going to get is the quantity branch A. So inside of our serializer, I can say that quantity branch A is going to be a serializers.integer field, because it's going to be a whole number. And then we can copy this over 2 times, but we need to say that it's the quantity of B and the quantity of C. Now the last thing we need to do before we have the data available in our backend is create a new URL similarly as before. So we can copy over our latest route that we created and then say that this is going to be equal to the product branch data. we can then say that this refers to the product branch view set. And then we can set the base name also to product branch data so that we have the URL correct right here. Now, before I forget, we also need to change the serializer inside of our views.py file, because this is not going to be the gender data serializer, but it's going to be our new product branch data serializer. So let's save this and take a look in our backend URL what this looks like. So we're now inside of our backend, and you can see that we have a new URL for product branch data. And if I click on this one, you can see that we have for each product line name, the name of the product line, and then for each of the branches, we have a quantity specified. So this is now kind of in the same format as our example earlier. So now it is time to bring this to our front end. Now that part is similar as what we did in the last video as well. We can go to the front end, the source, the components, and then our dashboard1.jsx. And we can, similarly as before, create a new constant that is going to store our data, which in this case will be my product branch data. And then we can change this one to set my product branch data. And then we can fetch the data inside of our get data constant by just copying over what we did previously and then say that we want this to be equal to the URL that we've just defined. And just to be sure, I'm going to copy this one over and then put it in the dashboard one. And then we need to say that it needs to set the data that it retrieves inside of the set my product branch data variable, which is going to bring it to this. So let's save this. And then we can actually log this data by saying that my data is going to be logging the my product branch data. So let's save this, open our front end, and see what we see. So back inside of our front end, I'm just going to refresh the page. And if we now inspect and go to the console, we see an array of 6 with our data on our front end. So that is working just fine. Now, what we now need to do is parameterize this bar chart right here and then create the different series that we want to show in our chart. And then we should be almost done. So when we take a look at our charts and then our stacked bar chart, you can see that we need to provide the data set, which is currently in this constant, but actually we don't want it to come from this constant. So we can just delete the complete data set like this. And then we can say inside of my stacked bar chart that we expect it to provide a data set so that it can be passed to this bar chart. Now what we can then do inside of our dashboard one is actually provide the data set that it needs to use. So if we scroll down, we can say that my stacked bar chart is going to be expecting a data set. And this data set is going to be equal to the my product branch data, because that is where we have specified our data. Now, if we save this and we go to our front end, it will not show anything because we don't have the series defined yet correctly. Because in the stacked bar chart, it refers to the data key, so what we want to see on our x-axis, and then also the different series that we want to present inside of our stacked bar chart. The next thing we want to arrange is make sure that the label for the x-axis is actually also set dynamically. So we can just populate the desired column that we want to see as the x-axis from our dashboard one page instead of hard-coded inside of our stacked bar chart, because like this, it is not reusable. So we can also in here state that we want to have a parameter called x label name like this. And then we can add that to the dataset by doing some parentheses in here, and next to the dataset prop, we can also specify that we want to see the X label name. In the last step, we also would like to define the series that we want to see inside of our dashboard one page and not inside of these series parameters of our stacked bar chart. So what we can do for that one is actually copy over the series, so the square brackets and everything inside of this right here. And then let's just paste it here so we don't forget, and then we comment it out. And then the series is just going to also be a parameter called series. And then we can put that on the top as well, next to the X label name, so that we can let our MyStack bar chart know that we're going to pass in the series from our dashboard1 file as well. Now, if we go up a little bit, we can delete the value formatter and the constant of chart settings because we don't really need it, and then save this file. And now we need to go to our dashboard1 page and define the values of the dataset, the X label name, and the series. So we're now inside of our dashboard1, and of course the dataset was already defined because that is equal to my product branch data. But now we can also make sure that we have the parameters in here, starting with the X label name. So inside of the chart 3, next to the dataset, we also define X label name, and we need to set this to the value of the column that we want to represent the x-axis. Now going to our API again, you can see that is product line underscore underscore name, because that one has the values in here. So that's the value I'm going to put in there. Now for the series, we actually want to define those in this file right here. So what I can do is go to the stack bar chart and just copy over this format from our series. And then we can go to the dashboard1.jsx page, and underneath the use effect, create a new constant called mySeries. And that is going to be equal to the same structure that we see here, but then we just need to comment this stuff out so that it's actually mySeries like this. Now in our backend, you can see that we want to have quantity branch A, B, and C. So I copy over quantity branch A. Then we can make sure that the data keys are equal to quantity branch A, quantity branch B, and also quantity branch C. Now, as the label, I can define that this is branch A, this one can be the branch B, and this one can be branch C. Value formatter we have just deleted, so that one can also go. And I want them all to be in the same stack, so I'm going to give them all a stack of A, and that should make sure that they're all stacked on top of each other. But now I also need to copy over the constant of mySeries and let our chart know that the series is defined in mySeries. Now, one very important thing, which I also stressed before, make sure that in your series here, you don't have those square brackets anymore, otherwise it will not work. Okay, so let's check out the result in our front end. And we are now in our front end, and you can see that we have a nice looking stacked bar chart with the different values of the different branches in the bars and some of the labels right here on the bottom. Now, the issue of our chart at the moment is that the labels are quite long. You can see that they don't even fit here. So one of the things that we can do is actually make sure that those labels are a little bit pivoted so that they're not going from left to right, but from top to bottom, so that it's better formatted and easier readable for the user. And hopefully they will then appear all 6. Now, luckily, Material UI Charts has a very easy parameter that we can use on the x-axis that can fix that for us. So I'm just going to, for the sake of space, put scale type right here and the data key right there. And now we can define something called tick label style. And this is going to format the different ticks of the labels, and we can make sure that they're perhaps a little bit smaller, but also that they are at an angle. So what we can do right here is we can open some squarely brackets and start by define angle. And in there, we, for example, can say that we want an angle of 45 degrees so that they're turned a little bit to the side. And let's save that. And now you can already see that we see some input right there, but it does not look very good and it's going through all of my bars. So this is not really the perfect solution, I'm afraid. So we can actually tell it to let the text start at the bottom of our graph by mentioning text anchor, and then we can set that one to start. And let's save that one. But now we only see half of it because our graph stops right there. Now I've played around with it a little bit in the meantime, and if we set the angle to 20, the text anchor to start, and we do a font size of 10, it just about fits our page. So when we now go to our front end, you will see that we can see kind of which labels we have like this. And in general, I would just recommend to shorten this a little bit and, for example, have the labels of electronic, fashion, food, health, home, and sports, so that it's a little bit easier to put on the screen. So the last thing I want to discuss is data labels, because we also want to see data labels on our bars. Now, adding the data labels for each of the bars is quite easy. We can just do bar label and then set that one equal to value, like this. And when we now go to our front end, you can see that we have the value displayed in the different bars. So you can quickly identify the values of each segment. Now for this chart type, I would actually not recommend to use the data labels all the time because it can make it quite messy. Also, when you have a lot of different labels specified, it can be quite overcrowded. And when you select it, you can also see the quantities inside of the tooltip. So in this case, for me, I'm just going to remove the bar label of value because I don't really think it is too valuable in this case. And as a last step, I'm going to change the height of my bar chart to 250. Reason for that is that my pie chart and donut chart are also around the 200 in height. And if we go to our front end now, this just looks a little bit better. What I would recommend in general if you build your application is put your bar chart on a separate row with charts that fit that a little bit better. Because if you make a pie chart or a donut chart too big, it looks quite weird. But if you make your bar chart too small, it also doesn't really make sense anymore. And that is actually all for this video. In this video, I showed you how you can create a stacked bar chart using Material UI charts. In the next video, we're going to continue and we're going to be creating a nice looking line chart, which is going to display the quantities over the different dates inside of our database. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.